Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Bullshit. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie Snyder, and I am a high performance mentor. Through my unique blend of strategy, mindset, and intuition, I help men and women to cut through the BS in order to create the life and business they desire. So, I'm going to give it to you real straight today. We're going to talk about what do I do, right? I get this question a lot. Okay, Steph, I know what story's in my way. I understand the story, but what do I do now? What's the thing that I do now? And I love this so much because honestly, we're walking around being like, okay, show me how and I'll do it, right? And we talk about the follow through, the accountability, all that stuff. You've heard this on my podcast before. And so let's say that you are in a position where you're not happy with your money situation, right? And so I like to always, I think of this in terms of, I would do that, but I have no money, right? So what's your but? What's that reasoning why you can't do the thing? Money is a big one, right? It is a big one, and quite frankly, we don't argue about it because I'm not going to sit here and judge, right? But if you are not living the life that you want because of your money situation, it is time to do something different. And so when I was making notes for this podcast, I was thinking about, all right, if you were rich, if you were skinny, if you were confident, what would you do? Right? If you were already that, how would your behaviors be changing? Think about that for a second. If you wanted to be rich and you were already rich, what would you be doing differently than you are right now? Or if you wanted to lose some weight, if you wanted to be healthier, what would you be doing? The answer already came to you. We know what it is that we're supposed to be doing. We know. The issue is, why don't we do it? Right? That's the biggest issue. But we know. And so let's break it down. How do you start changing something, right? And for me, I was experimenting. I love to do little experiments. I talk about this all the time. I'm actually going to encourage you to do a 30-day experiment where for the next 30 days, you take this one thing and you flip it on its head, right? Experiments are fun because here's the reason why they're so fun. It takes the pressure off. You're like, oh, well, let's just kind of see what happens. What would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did this for 30 days, right? And it takes that pressure off of having to perform and to create something specific, right? And so I like to do all these little mini experiments. And so one thing that I've been working on this year is healing my relationship with money. And so earlier in the year, I had this epiphany where I thought, okay, let's see. I said, for this month, I am going to make very different money decisions than I have before. And so every time I looked at my bank account, I said, okay, what would I do normally? Okay, let's do the opposite of that. It was legitimately how I operated because my money relationship was so flawed that I needed to look at it. And so I said, okay, well, here's how I usually feel when I open my bank account. Okay, let's not do that, right? Let's do the opposite of that because that money story isn't helping. So how do we flip it on its head? And the truth is, we all know what to do. We just sometimes need a little reminder, right? There's this saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I can't tell you how many times I have read something, but it didn't hit me the same way as when I needed it. Right. And so prime example, one of the things that I was reading a book with my kids, and my older kids were reading, just so you know, financial literacy is a huge thing in our house. We're starting to implement that big time. And so we started to read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And one of the things in there was pay yourself first. And I knew this, I've known this, but it was like, oh, that reminder just really kind of hit you. And so the thing is, we know what it's going to take. It's going to take change. It's going to take you being aware of that behavior and choosing differently. It's not hard, right? These shifts, these changes are not hard, but they are life-changing when you actually become consistent at it, right? Because if you are somebody who has been unhealthy your whole life, or maybe the last 5 years, right? If you've been unhealthy your whole life, it's going to feel hard at first because it's taking a whole lot more brain power to choose than to knee-jerk reaction what it is that you're eating. Same thing with your money story. You have been habitual about your money and your spending, that it's going to feel, I'm using air quotes here, it's going to feel difficult in the beginning, but it's simply because you've slowed down and you've decided differently. So when it comes to actually making the change, right? Because here I'd talk about, okay, let's talk about this BS story. Cool. Once we've identified the story, then what do we do? Well, once you've identified the BS excuse, right? You're not skinny, you're not rich, you're not confident, whatever it is, right? Those were just the top 3 that I grabbed. Okay. Once you've identified that those are the things you're not, you know what it will take to change because we just prompted you, right? If you're not healthy, what do you need to do to be healthy? Done, right? A bunch of things just rattled off. Eat more vegetables, exercise, right? Lower your sugar intake, right? There's a million different ways to do it, right? But you know, because it just popped in your head, right? And then once you know what to do, you've got to slow down and catch yourself doing the other thing. Because so much of our life is done as a reaction, right? And one of the things, this is, again, prime example, one of the things I was doing when I was shifting my money story was as soon as the money hit my bank account, I would pay the bill. So it was legitimately like a transfer date, right? It wasn't a payday because it was just it was from my bank account to the bills, right? And so I said, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore because that's not serving me. And so what I got used to was having the money just sit there until the due date for the bill. And holy crap, was that uncomfortable, right? It was like when I decided, years and years ago, when I decided to get control of my time, I said, okay, one of the things that's making me absolutely crazy is the fact that I obsess over laundry. That was like the bane of my existence was laundry. And so when I decided that laundry was just going to be done on Mondays and Thursdays, and still a decade later, that is pretty much the rule of thumb, right? And so it was so uncomfortable to watch clothes actually pile up in my laundry bin. So uncomfortable. Because I was like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll just this once, I'll do the laundry. But I had to force myself to let that laundry pile up and create the discipline around Monday and Thursday laundry. And the same was true with my bank account, right? The money came in and I had to just let it sit. And it was so uncomfortable at first because I was used to being like, okay, got the money, let's pay the bills, we'll see how much is left over. And I wanted to teach myself to be used to larger and larger amounts of money in that account, right? Instead of being like, okay, we're having the bare minimum in here just to pay the bills and everything else goes into the savings and then I never see it, right? That wasn't serving me. And so I had to shift that and go, okay, just let it sit. Be comfortable with that large sum of money that's in your bank account, right? Be comfortable with it there. Don't run away from it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't send it somewhere else. Just sit there and look at it, right? And that's what I had to do with the laundry initially. I had to sit there and look at it until I was like, okay, this is no longer an emotional trigger for me anymore. Cool, that story is like done. Check, next one, right? And the same can be true for all these other things, right? The laundry story is about my time. That money story is something that I've definitely shifted this year in a big way. And I really, really love that. And then, the health thing, right? Like, if you don't have the self-control to not eat Oreos at 10 o'clock at night, don't even buy the Oreos. Don't even put them in your house. And then you don't have to have the self-control because nobody's going to run out at 10 o'clock at night for a sleeve of Oreos. I don't know, maybe you will, right? But like, the thing is, you know what it's going to take. And so how do you carry it out? For me, again, I made it an experiment. It was simply, okay, for 30 days, let's do the total opposite of what I've done before and see how I feel. See what shifts in that relationship. 30 days. 30 days is going to go by anyways. And it doesn't have to be some crazy thing where you overhaul the entire lifestyle of that thing, right? If you are wanting to get healthy, I'm just going to break down. If you're wanting to get healthy, just spend 30 days drinking more water. Or spend 30 days without sugar. That'll change your life, right? It is just one simple thing. One little change. But what happens, and this is the beautiful thing that happens, is when you get the win from that little thing, it snowballs. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, 30 days, that was easy. Well, let me do another thing for 30 days. Cool. All right, let me do another thing for 30 days. Awesome. Let me do another thing for 30 days. And you're like, shoot, I've got so many good things going on right now. I can do a couple of things for this next 30 days, right? The beginning of the year, I started off, I was flossing my teeth and doing a coconut oil rinse every night to whiten my teeth. It took me 5 minutes, but it shifted. And then I got that win and I was like, okay, cool. Let me try this thing. Okay, cool. Let me try this thing. Right. And when it came to shifting my money story, one of the very first things that I shifted was paying myself first. Oh, right. After I got comfortable leaving the money there, and I would pay myself first before the bills, because I learned that if I didn't pay myself first, it was going to go to something else. Same with your time. That's a story for another day. So that's a podcast episode for another day where I can just dive into all of that. But what I want you to understand here is the way to initiate this change is actually quite simple. It is really quite simple. Okay. So one, you've got to identify the block. What's stopping you from making this decision? What's stopping you from being healthier, from being rich, from being confident, right? Like, what are those BS stories that are coming up? Identify those. Okay. Then once you've identified them, pick one of them that you're going to work on, right? I know for me, I never want money to be an excuse years down the road from now, right? Like, oh, I can't do that because of the money. So that starts now, changing that story, right? Another thing that I don't ever want to be an excuse is, oh, I don't feel good enough to do that, right? Like, at some point there will be grandkids running around my house, and I don't ever want to think, oh, I can't move, I can't be active with them. So that for me starts now. So I continue to be active. I continue to, do yoga, whatever it is that I'm training for. I continue to be active so that when grandbabies show up, I am still active with them, right? So again, identify what it is that you want, what's holding you back, right? It's a very simple, if I were X, then I could do Y, right? We think it's this causal relationship, and it's actually not, right? But if I were X, then I could do Y. That is a story that's holding you back. So once you've identified it, right? One simple change there. And take it into account, do it for 30 days. 30 days. I would love to see what happens in your life. 30 days. One simple thing. And if you need help finding that one simple thing to change, that again will create that snowball, feel free to reach out to me. I have single sessions that are incredible sessions. We do 60 or 90 minutes depending on what it is that we're getting into. If it's business, it's usually a little bit longer. If it's more life stuff, it's usually about 60 minutes because for business, I do a bit more strategy kind of things. And so, one, reach out to me if you want a single session. If you are looking for some support going into the new year, you're tired of the BS stories and you're ready to shift it all in the new year, I do have 3 and 6 month private coaching opportunities available. So you can definitely reach out to me for that. You can find me on Instagram at stephaniesnyderphd, or you can head over to my website, stephaniesnyderphd.com. And those are both great ways in which you can work with me. The single sessions, you could get started as early as today. Private sessions, if you want to do a longer term container, we could get started pretty quickly, but it does take a little bit more work on your end because there'll be some questions that I ask ahead of time to make the most use of our time. So I hope that you are having a beautiful day, and as always, be you, because the world needs more of you. Bye, love.